Uh, Thanks and welcome to this session of Let's Talk Money. So we keep doing these sessions, especially with subject matter experts, and talk about anything and everything under the sun, which can, add value to us. So it's our pleasure to have you. I lovingly call him, actually, with his permission. Though I like to call him Sir, but with his permission, he's lovingly kind of forbidden me to call him Sir, and I have to call him Boss. So such an
Yeah,
affable.
because our understanding is if he calls me sir, I call him madam.
Yeah. So now you see where we are getting. I think such an affable person, down to earth, and I've really enjoyed knowing him, and every opportunity that I get to chat with him. And I think now know Boss for, if I'm not wrong, close to 5 years, and it's been a very exciting journey, both from what has happened in both his and my careers, uh, and also the journeys that in some sense we have undertaken. I remember when I had met him for the first time, I was a so-called corporate honcho, and from there on, and Boss was an accomplished and very loved professor at the management school, and from there on, he's obviously taken a path, very different from what you would expect a management professor to take. And I obviously quit and did what I did. But lots to chat with you about. And first of all, many, many congratulations on this stellar book. I think the whole the and it starts with the topic itself, right? In our world it is called clickbait. It's all called clickbait, right? So you put a topic like this that somebody opens the email, but I guess in your the book itself is a
Yeah.
very topical. Yeah, absolutely. And other nightmares. So before
Yeah.
I go down that before I go down that path, I want to start today's discussion by asking you that, when we were going through when we were graduating, and there was this starry-eyed dream to do an MBA. You look forward to going to a management school, and the whole ethos about management school is that you will be taught management philosophy, and that will be the stepping stone for you to go and uh, take up a job like a GE or a McKinsey. You will work in a PepsiCo or Unilever. Uh, so tell me what transpired for you to really move from there to the startup world, because I think that is a very, in my mind, a very interesting spin to the whole thing.
Yeah, good question, Samant. Thanks, and great to be here with you. Like Samant mentioned, Samant is an old friend. He's not old; he's very young, but he's an old friend. And I don't know. I don't think he's mentioned the fact that his wife was my student. Neha was my student many years back. I think about 15 years back. Yeah.
Thanks for putting it on
Okay.
record.
Acha. Yeah. So it's an interesting story. I spent about 20 years in the IT industry. I spent about 20 years in MDI as a professor. And when I was in MDI, a lot of students used to come to me and they would ask me questions. Look, sir, this is what I want to start. This is a startup I want to create. Please give me advice, etc., etc. So I used to give that advice. Now, I found it very, very interesting for two, three reasons. One is it was great fun to sit with a founder and figure out what direction the company would take, and to figure out the marketing campaign and so on. And even more important, I found I was learning a hell of a lot. So I don't know how much those young people learned from me, but I learned a hell of a lot from them. So that was one part, involvement in startups. The second part was, I've been in the stock market for now about, I think about 30, 35 years, right? Lots and lots of years, lots of ups and downs. And I've been an investor. Now, I've realized as an investor, let us say I invest in HDFC Bank or Reliance Industries or any such company. There is no way in hell I can sit across the table with Mukesh Ambani and discuss with him what his strategies are. Tell him, boss, Mukesh bhai, tu galat kar raha hai. Change it. This is the way to do it. Okay, there's no way in hell I could. So my investment was basically passive, which means paisa dal diya. I put in the money and I expect whatever returns I get. Whereas here, I found when I was sitting with these young founders who had their own startups, I was actually involved in the direction setting, in also the running of the company, right? Which was so much more satisfying, so much more satisfying. So what happened, Samant, was that in the process, I became an angel investor, and that was about 6 years back. And I remain an angel investor, where I put in money, but my primary purpose is not to make money. My primary purpose is to spend time with young people, figure out with them jointly, what direction the company will take and take key decisions, and in the process to learn and stay young. So that's how it all started. And I think, I've retired from MDI now, but I would say my true career is just beginning.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's lovely. And I completely agree with you that, that your career is really starting. So I just have one follow-on question from what you said about this thing. Uh, at the intersection, if I was to, I love Venn diagrams, and especially when you intersect them. So at the intersection of how
Yeah.
traditional management is taught and now what you see at the startup world, is there an intersection at all? Is it small, big, large? Sometimes they say some things never change, it's just the packaging that keeps changing. So your thoughts on on that aspect?
Okay, so you're right. I have seen both worlds. I have seen the world of management schools and I've seen the world of startups. I think there is an intersection. It is positive. Whether small or large actually depends on the individual faculty member. And I'll tell you why. Unfortunately, see, if you look at an engineering school, right, you look at a place like IIT or a regional engineering college or whatever, it is sufficient for the professor to teach from a textbook. That's enough. But if you want to teach management, you cannot say, look, this is what happened in this Harvard case study. Now you tell me what you would do. You cannot teach from a textbook, right? You cannot teach from other people's cases. You have to have experience.
Right.
And that experience could come either by spending time in industry or by being a consultant or both or a combination, right?
Right.
Now, there are several faculty members who do have that kind of experience. In fact, at MDI, a lot of our faculty members have come after 4, 5, 6, sometimes 20, 25 years of experience in industry. And therefore, they are largely sharing their experiences, which is so much more valuable for a management school than simply picking up a textbook and saying, look, now you read chapter 4, case number 3. Okay.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of people in management schools still teach purely from textbooks or from borrowed cases, right? And they have no experience. The only experience they have is academic. So where the faculty has no such experience, obviously there is no overlap. But where the faculty does have experience, there is a sizable overlap. And I would say very bluntly, Saman, if you look at the students, even students really like to learn from faculty who actually have experience. I'll give you a simple example. There used to be a guy in MDI, a faculty member in finance called TP Ghosh, right?
Okay.
He was very, very good at, things like the stock market and so on. What this man used to do was every time he had a session, right, he would open up live some stock exchange. It could be the Japanese stock exchange, it could be the national stock exchange in India or whatever, and he would pick up examples from there. Now that's live learning. and people loved him.
Yeah.
And that's how they learned from him, right?
Yeah.
So I would say the Venn diagram ideally should be very solidly overlapping, and therefore the intersection
Yeah.
should be large.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in many cases, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. So I think you talked about a very interesting word, and I'll pick it up, to lead the conversation from there, which is case study, right? Because that is something which you have, like you rightly said, there should be a very large overlap. So you have used the whole case study approach in your new book itself. So rather than it being a typical format, you have kind of made it
Yeah.
real world. And I mean, we love the fact that you've covered us. We are one of the stories
Yeah.
there, case studies there. But I
Yes.
think, and I was just looking on Amazon, you've got a 96% five-star rating on the book, which means that people are definitely loving what you have really put out there. So my question to you is, what made you write this? Considering the fact that now you're saying that there was one management school of thought, there is the new age world where you said, a lot of your students would come and say, I want to do this product. What was the reason for what made you write this? Put it all together.
One big reason, and I'll try and bring it down to the specifics of the book. Um, Whenever we used to sit with students, I used to sit with students, and of course, my colleague Sushanto Mitra, who is the CEO of Lead Angels. Whenever we start with founders, students, young entrepreneurs, we realize that in many, many cases, I would say most cases, um, they had no clue about how to run a business. They had no clue about how to create a business plan. They had no real clue about how to pitch to investors. They had no clue about this whole process of fundraising. They really had no clue about, what to do in case you wanted to market a B2C business. So they had very, very little clue.
Yeah.
So what we realized was the advice that we were giving youngsters, because a lot of people used to come to us for advice, a lot of the advice was common. Okay. So we said, okay, since people have no clue and the advice is common, rather than giving the advice only to one person at a time, let's write a book, because that would be common advice for anybody who has a startup or anybody who wants to create a startup. So
Sure.
that was the starting point. I have anyway been a writer. So I've written fair number of columns, articles, and so on. And this, by the way, is my fourth book.
Yeah.
So I always like writing, and I said, wonderful, let's do it. And I teamed up with Sushanto because he has a lot of experience in this field.
Sure.
Now, what we realized was I went to several bookshops and tried to look for books on the subject. I realized most books were about the American environment, right? So they would talk about, Amazon, or they talk about Google, they will talk about whatever else, right?
Facebook and
PayPal and so on. Yeah, exactly. Now, that's not relevant to people here. So if you're looking at creating a startup in India, you need to understand Indian startups, you need to understand startups in the Indian environment, right? Because everything is going to be different here. So we narrowed it down and we realized that most books, there are very few books for people which are based on the Indian environment. That is step one. Step two, what we then realized was even about India, you do have some books. It's not that you don't have any books, but they talk about these huge guys. They talk about Flipkart, they talk about Naukri, they talked about
ATM.
India Mart, they talk about, Byju's. The problem is when you have a young founder, or sometimes not so young founder, the poor guy, he's he is battling with a startup which is, you know, just about starting off, maybe has no revenues, or maybe he's just about starting revenues, or maybe he only has an idea. He cannot again relate to a Byju's or a Naukri or a Flipkart. So
Yeah.
that's too far beyond his comprehension, right?
Yeah.
So what he wants to do is he wants to learn from startups which are younger, which are, um, you know, which have not reached the Naukri kind of stage where the valuation is over $1 billion, unicorn, and so on and so forth. Just to give you a parallel, it's, if you want to learn about movies, about acting, it's great to learn from Shah Rukh Khan, but it's probably much more important to learn from those young people who have just got into the movie industry and are probably still struggling,
Right.
right? So that was step two. And we realized almost nobody talks about, in fact, nobody talks about these young startups, right? So we said we will talk about young startups, which is the common man,
Right.
rather than, the Byju's and the Flipkarts of the world. And the most important, you would agree with me, Saman, that you probably learn a lot more from failures than you would from successes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Nobody talks about failures.
Yeah.
The only way anybody is willing to talk about his failure is if he's had a decent dose of alcohol in the evening. Then it's all starts pouring out. Otherwise, you don't learn about them, right?
Yeah.
So how do you learn from guys who fail? Again, taking you back to the analogy of Shah Rukh Khan, it's good to learn from the guy who's there. It's also good to learn from the guy who came from the fields of Punjab, tried his luck, couldn't succeed, went back to the fields of Punjabi. Why have you gone back?
Yeah.
What is it that went wrong?
Right.
So what we realized was we will have stories about smaller startups, except for yours one of the biggest that we have in the book. Yeah? You're probably the biggest success story we have. So smaller startups, A, and B, we will talk equally about successes and failures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then from all this, we will extract what the learning is going to be. So actually, the interesting thing is it's turned out to be quite a unique book,
Yeah.
because you probably don't have a book which covers things like this.
So a couple of things that made me made it stand out in my perception and understanding was, one is this whole thing about the choice of startups. And again, I don't want to talk about us, but the choice of startups. These are not. It is very easy to today talk about a Paytm and so on and so forth. But I think the choice of startup was a very, very interesting idea that you took. That they have to be. To me, it was relatable. It was something that was relatable,
Exactly.
that somebody
Exactly.
who wants to really start out feels that, oh, Paytm to wahan chala gaya. This is something
Exactly.
that is next door. It's just a few
Abs-
paces away for me, and therefore I can make that journey as well. So that was one. Two, I
Absolutely.
can't agree with you more that, and I think that has to do a lot with our society per se, is how we view failures. I think historically we have a sense of negativity associated with failure. To say मैं fail हो
Yeah.
जाऊंगा, and it starts from school, right? That अगर आप fail हो जाओगे तो क्या होगा,
Correct.
and so we see failure very negatively.
Correct.
I read this very interesting
Yeah.
case study on investment. Since you talked about investments, that's a common passion. So there was a survey done on understanding the risks, the word risk, how it is understood in developed economies versus developing economies. And the outcome of that survey was that in developing economies like ourselves, risk is feared. If I come to you or
Yeah.
anybody and say, "Aap risk loge," and the answer will be no, not at all. But if you go
Correct.
to a developed economy and ask somebody, would you like to take a risk? Risk is romanticized there. They understand that,
Yeah.
if they don't take, they will ask you, okay, how much? What is the risk return trade off? How much risk will I need to take? And therefore, what is the payoff that I'm looking at? So I think
Correct. Correct.
that's one part, that risk is very negatively viewed in our society, and that obviously has to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
change. So that leads to me to my next question for you, which is to, after meeting so many of startup founders, not just for the book, but from the ecosystem perspective for the last so many years, what is your advice for who should not do a startup? Because a lot of times we look for answers, but I think it is important for us to know what you should not do. If you know, like you said about Shah Rukh Khan and the new guy, if you can ask him that, okay, you have gone back to Bhatinda or Ludhiana, but can you tell us from your learning what a struggling or a new age actor should not do? I think that would be very, very precious for everybody. So your thoughts on that will be very valuable.
Okay. So your question, just to understand your question is who should not get into a startup, right?
Yeah. Who should not
Okay.
do a startup?
So I think you need to appreciate, and this is for all the guys who are on this call. Everybody needs to appreciate the fact that there are pluses and there are minuses in creating a startup. The plus obviously is you've created something, and you've created something out of nothing, and that's a huge high, huge high. And that's the kind of high you probably will find very difficult to get anywhere else. It's almost like climbing Mount Everest. My God, I've done it. I've created something which is disruptive. For example, what Samant has created, Squirrel, in the age group of youngsters, from 18 to 30, which I think is your target audience. It is probably the market leader in anything to do with financial services, right? And wealth management, right? So I think that's a huge high. Working on your own without a boss to sit on your head, and tell you, boss, ab ye kar, ab ye kar, ab ye kar, is a huge high. So those are huge highs. However, at the same time, it's a risky business. You're absolutely right. Um, I would say maybe if you're lucky, 1 out of 10 startups really make it big. There are a few which are okay, they're so, they continue, they plod along, but there are maybe 4 or 5 which just die. And they die maybe within 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever, right? So it's a risky business. Two, equally important, it's running a startup is not a part-time job. It is not something where you say, okay, I will do it from 9 to 6. After 6, I will be playing tennis or I will be watching Netflix. At night, I'll go to the disco. Nahi boss, time nahi hota hai. If you have a call at 11 o'clock in the night, 12 o'clock in the night, because there is some crisis with the customer, you have to take it. It's your company, right? And you'll have a lot of ups and downs, right? It's not something where you start it and you realize, look, everything is smooth sailing all the way through.
Yeah.
So it's a high stress job. It's a high stress environment, and it's risky, and it's a 24/7 job. So if what you're looking for is 9 to 6, I come home in the evening, I, relax, my job is over, boss cannot call me, don't create a startup. But if you're willing to do all this, I cannot imagine something better that you can do.
Yeah.
It's your baby. You're creating your own baby. Like I told you today, at my age, I'm 65 now. At my age, I'm delighted when I can invest in a startup and build it up along with the founder, because it's my baby,
Right.
along with that founder, of course. So I would say, if you're passionate about this and you're willing to put up with these stresses and the risk and so on, great thing to do. But if you're the kind who wants a 9 to, of course, nowadays 9 to 5 job to hota nahi hai. If you're the kind of guy who wants a 9 to 8 job, don't create a startup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very simple.
Fair enough. So what is very interesting is that when we were, when we put this event out, we also asked people in terms of what would they, we didn't want it to be a dialogue or a monologue. We wanted people it to be participative. So we asked people what would they, what are their questions? What would they want us to talk about? And of course, there are a few questions they've sent in. Some of them are about investments, personal finance. Some of them are specifically about the startup world. And so I'm going to kind of pose a couple of them to you. But I think one important question, interesting question there was that how to find the right team and the team member. So, while I would love to know your thoughts from your experience about it.
Very tough, very complex. Because if you're in a startup, you are not like TCS or Infosys, where you can take people by the hundreds and then train them up. And if, of those 600 that you take, if 50 of them don't perform or 100 of them don't perform, no problem. They leave and the rest stay behind it.
Yeah.
You don't have that luxury. You need very few guys, right? Right in the beginning of your startup, you may need 2 people, 3 people, 6 people, whatever. I think one very good method that I have found to take people at a junior level, is to take on people in internships, right? For example, a lot of people in MBA schools, right? Or why MBA schools, even engineering colleges, they are very keen to work in parallel with their course. Okay, number one. Take them on, and as an intern, either you don't pay anything or you pay a very, very small amount, because basically the guy is in it for learning. Right? Very often, people are quite happy to join as interns even after passing out, right? It's a good idea to take on these guys as interns and then try them out for some time. They will figure out whether it's the right environment for them or not. You will figure out whether it's the right environment for you or not.
Right.
So that is one way of taking junior guys. If you look at slightly senior guys, people with experience, 3, 4, 5, 6 years experience, I think what you need to look for is, see, capability, skill level is something you can test out, not a problem. What is difficult to test out is attitude, because if you're taking on a 9 to 6 kind of guy, then you're going to be in trouble, and attitude is going to be very, very important. I think it's very important to take people who've already been through the grind of a startup environment, right? So somebody who's worked in a startup before knows that it's not 9 to 6, it's going to be a grind, etc., etc. That's one. Second thing, unlike large companies where you will have fairly clear-cut roles which are defined, in a startup there's no defined role. Okay? I started my career in a company called NIIT, and it was about 5 months old when I started. That was a startup.
Yeah.
There's no clearly defined role. यहाँ पे requirement है, तुम करो. I think it's very important to figure out whether that guy has the ability to keep switching between roles or not. Right?
Yeah.
Very simple example. You're close to the end of your year, financial year, right? And you haven't met targets. Maybe everybody needs to move into sales or marketing because you need business, right?
Right.
Do these guys have the ability to multiplex, or do these guys have the ability to move from X to Y to Z? So for instance, a guy who says, I'm a programmer and I can only program. Unless he's great, it may not be a good thing to hire this guy. Whereas if you have a guy who says, yes, I have the skill, but sure, I mean, if you want me to go and grab customers, I'm willing to do that. Then I think you have people in hand. But ultimately, it's not easy. Getting manpower for startups is actually not easy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So only two bits that I can add from my experience is that especially there was a question about team members and then co-founders. So I think it is just like a marriage. It is as important a due diligence, so to say, that you need to do on, especially like boss said about attitude, about common interests. Because at the end of the day, what I've found that it is a very lonely journey. There is not too many people that you can go back to. You can't go back to your family. You can't go back to your team members. So you need, co-founders or team is something that you basically go back to, and you have to be the mobile charger for each other, because you will get drained out every day, and you have to make sure that you get
Yeah.
charged back to, for the next day. So yeah.
Sorry, let me just add something since you mentioned co-founder. Most important thing when you take on a co-founder, most important by far, is trust.
Right.
Because, it's a lifelong partnership. It's like marriage, right? It's a lifelong partnership uh, where you cannot be examining what your co-founder is doing all the time. You have to trust what he is doing.
Sure.
You cannot be checking, look, boss, aise mat karo, aise karo. No, trust has to be there. If you feel that he's, fooling you, if you feel he's siphoning off money, it just will not work. So I
Yeah.
think the most important thing in looking for a co-founder is trust, which is why I say either it should be from amongst one of your close friends, or if not, then take a guy, a senior enough guy, as an employee, watch him for some time, and then give him, X amount of
Yeah.
significant amount of ESOPs,
Sure.
so that he effectively becomes the stakeholder in your company.
Yeah.
The other important thing with a co-founder is, ideally, you should bring complementary skills to the table. So, if one is great at sales, the other guy should be great at operations. third guy may be terrific at, let's say, IT, right, or infrastructure or whatever. And the final thing about co-founders is the ideal number of co-founders in a company is either two or three. One person alone, like someone rightly mentioned, is not only tough and draining, it's also risky because the entire company is dependent only on one man, right?
Right.
And if you're looking at investment, the investor normally looks down upon companies which have a single co-founder, right?
Right.
Secondly, raising money is a time-consuming process. I mean, it's almost a full-time job, right? So if you're the only guy, what do you do? Do you run your business? Do you raise money?
Right.
Right? So it's always a good idea to have two or three, not too many, but two or three is an optimal number.
So you have just led me to asking the next question that somebody had put us, and that question is basically unescapable. I mean, every time you talk about startup, that question has to be asked and has to be answered. The question is how to get investors, and the easy answer I could have given to the gentleman was, please read the book. But since we have the pleasure of listening to you in real time. So, what would be your nishkarsh or summation of all your experience and the book to answering that question?
So I think, first of all, even before I answer that question, there is a more fundamental question to be answered, which is, do I need investment? Do I need external investment or not? Right? It's very, very important to understand that you should take external investment from investors only when you really need it. And you look at Samant Sikka's example in Squirrel, they got external investors only after they grew the business to a certain size. Before that, it was entirely their own money, right? So I think that's very, very important. At a point where you need money, sure, take it, but not before that. That's number one. Number two, I think it's very, very important to try and take as much as you can from your own sources, which means your friends, your family, chacha, mama, girlfriend's father, boyfriend's father, etc., etc., etc. Right? Because they will be willing to give you money early, and they will not ask too many questions because they know you, they trust you, hopefully. Well, you may have a situation where they know you and therefore they don't trust you,
Yeah.
but let's keep that aside. So it's always better to do that early because they will not ask too many questions and they'll give you money at a very early stage. Right? In today's environment, angel investors usually come in the next stage, right? Which is the first external investors in your company. And I would say they normally look for some proof of your company or your product or your service that you're offering. And that proof ideally is, how much traction have you got? Are you getting revenues? Are you getting customers? Are the customers increasing month on month, quarter on quarter? They want proof. Whereas your friends and family will not look for proof. And therefore, at a very early stage, they might be willing to give you money. So if you're looking at angel investors, which is like I said, the first external guys in your company, the best way is, see, there are about 7 or 8 large angel investment networks in the country. And when I say angel network, it's basically an organization which has members. It's like a club, right? A club which has members, and each member is an angel investor. So for example, I am from Lead Angels Network, right? And that's an organization which has about 150 to 200 angel investors, right? Now, what you do is you will approach one such angel investor, or one such angel network. For example, Lead Angels, or there are networks like Mumbai Angels, there's Hyderabad Angels, Chennai Angels. Then there are smaller ones like Chandigarh Angel, Jaipur Angel, and so on. So you will normally approach one of these angel networks, not individual investors, because it's how do you approach so many investors? If you're raising, let's say, 1 crore, each angel may put in only 5 to 6 lakhs, right? Therefore, you need about 15 to 20, maybe more angel investors to raise that 1 crore. And to get those 15 to 20 angel investors, you may have to approach 1,000 of them before you get those 15 to 20. So you can't approach individual investors, you have to approach a network. Yeah. And like I told you, Lead Angels, Mumbai Angels, Indian Angel Network, possible network. Once you approach them, there is a process of shortlisting, and then shortlisted startups are given a chance to pitch to their members. And depending on the interest of the members, then you're evaluated in great detail, due diligence is done, and finally, hopefully, the money comes in. So the way to approach investment is three questions. Question one, do you really need external investment? Question two, if you do, try and do it through your friends and family first. Question three, when you need a larger amount which your friends and family cannot, yes, go to angels, but go through an angel network.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think that is very, very relevant and helpful. Now, there are obviously some questions about, investments, which are more about how do I start investing in equities, and how do you, what is the actual value of money? There was a very interesting fundamental question of how is the actual value of money. And I think to me, that answer is, I mean, if I have to give a simple answer, to me, the actual value of money is purchasing power. So at the end of the day, the money is nothing but a store of value, and that value is purchasing power. So what is a dollar worth if I can go and get a Coke or a burger in McDonald's in US? Or what is a 100 rupees worth here if I can go and get 2 bottles of Coke here, or a burger in Burger King, whatever. So to me, a simple answer to that question is that it is a purchasing power, and therefore it keeps changing. And that leads me to the next part, which is the most important one, which is to why should you invest at all? I think you need to invest because you need to make sure that your purchasing power of your money is not eroded, because there is inflation that will continue to go up. Things will keep getting expensive at whatever rate every year, depending upon the economic climate. But the fact is that the thumb rule is your money has to beat the rate of inflation for it not to lose its purchasing power. And I'm sure boss can also add value on this question, but I'll maybe take a couple of minutes to answer this question about how to start investing in shares. I think what I have found is that ultimately your objective is to buy companies which are growing better, which are growing very, very well, which have either have moats in their business or have predictable growth in the markets that they work in, or on the product that they manufacture, or the service that they deliver. And I personally feel that for any new one-time starter, I think mutual fund is a great place to start, because it offers them, any investor, three very, very powerful facilities or features. First, I think it offers them diversification. So if somebody was to buy today a Nestle stock, that stock is worth 4 or 5,000 rupees. So basically, for 5,000 rupees, you'll end up buying just one share, and that is not diversified enough. But with 5,000 rupees in the mutual fund today, you will buy a portfolio which has probably 20 to 30 stocks. So Nestle could be one of them. So your money is really being spread over those 20, 30 investment ideas. So one most important advantage is the advantage of diversification. The other advantage is, according to me, the liquidity. The fact is that tomorrow, if you need the money, instead of selling out all of those, let's say, even if somebody argues and say, I can buy those 20 stocks myself, I have enough money. Here, the fact of the matter is you press a button and your entire portfolio is redeemed, and that also fractionally. So let's say you bought a Nestle stock for 4,000 rupees, but you need only 2,000 rupees back now, right? So what will happen is that you will end up selling the entire stock. Now you can't sell half the stock, but if you have a mutual fund unit, you invested 5,000 rupees, you can take out 500 rupees as well. So that is the other advantage of diversification that comes to your advantage when you go through the mutual fund route. And third is, of course, the convenience and the transaction costs for a retail and a small investor who's starting upfront. Instead of going and opening a share trading account and a demat account and so on and so forth, none of which is needed, you straight away go and buy mutual fund units. So my simple answer to that question would be that, mutual fund units are great. You can start with as little as 100 rupees. You can set up something called as an SIP, which is like a disciplined way of investing. So anything that you can spare every month, you can go ahead and start buying equities. But I must compliment the question itself, because the question is, how do I start buying shares? So to my mind, equities are the best asset class. They help in, creating wealth over a longer period of time. So that itself is a great start. If you're asking the right question, it is just a modus operandi that you have to choose. And to my mind, mutual funds are great. So, boss, anything that your experience here would also be very, very relevant.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I agree with Samant, absolutely 800%. You mentioned one thing, Samant, some time back. You said that culturally, India is a risk-free society.
Risk
And
averse.
absolutely
Risk averse.
risk-averse. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, not risk-free.
Yeah.
Risk-averse
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
They don't want to take risks. You see a huge number of people who park their money in fixed deposits, right? Look at today's environment. If you put your money in a fixed deposit, what is the interest you're getting, right? Typically, the maximum interest you will get today is going to be about 5.5 to 6%. Okay, number one. Number two, on that you will pay tax. And we don't know how much tax, it depends on your tax bracket. So let's assume you are in a medium tax bracket, which is 20%, which means of that 5.5%, 20% is gone. So effectively, you're getting 4% interest, right? Now, look at it this way. The rate of inflation in India as of today is about 6+% as of today.
Yeah.
It may go up, it may go down. Let's take an average of 6%, which means if you have 100 rupees today, which you invested in a fixed deposit, right? That 100 rupees will go up to 104 rupees 50 paise at the end of 1 year, because you got interest minus tax. But the cost of goods that you can buy for that 100 rupees, that cost has gone up to 106. So
Absolutely.
effectively, the value of your the money that you've invested has gone down, and the longer you delay it, the more the value keeps going down. So it's very unfortunate. You have so many people who've reached their retirement, they're into retirement, no more salary, very, very meager pension, and they realize the savings that they thought they had, they actually don't have. The
Yeah.
only way to overcome this is to invest in the stock market. The only way, right? Well, you can do invest in property as well, but that's very, very illiquid.
Yeah.
If you want, let's say 1 lakh rupees or 5,000 rupees, you can't suddenly say, I'll sell off 1% of my property. No, you can't. You either sell off the whole property or you don't,
Right.
right? So share market is absolutely very much required. Typically, if you are sensible, you can earn, let's say, on an average 15% returns per annum on an average in the long run from the share market, which beats inflation.
Right.
And that's a huge, huge, huge benefit, which means every year the value of your money is actually going up rather than going down as it was with fixed deposits.
Right.
Secondly, the question that Samant raised, I agree with him. If you're new to this kind of business, please invest through mutual funds. Because, if you're investing directly in shares, you need to study those companies. And unfortunately, all companies, they will have ups and downs, right? So for example, I'll give you a very simple example. About 4 years back, one of the darlings of the stock market was the biggest company on the pharma sector called Sun Pharma.
Yeah.
Absolute darling. I mean, they could do nothing wrong, right? Now, suddenly what happened was the USA was the biggest market. Their regulators started tightening their hold, and therefore Sun Pharma's growth actually came down dramatically. Their share price dropped to half, right? Now, if you are an investor who invests directly in stocks, you need to understand what's happening in the US environment. You need to understand what the regulator does and where Sun Pharma is selling. But most common man investors, I would call them Aam Aadmi investors, will not know all that, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, you leave it to the expert, leave it to the manager of the mutual fund, the fund manager as we call him. He knows, he studies these companies, he decides where to put money in and where not to, right? So that's a very, very good way. And by the way, Squirrel, which is Samant's baby, Samant Sikka's baby, that's a great way to enter this and invest in mutual funds. Just one quick caveat I would like to add. You know, in March this year, when COVID happened, during March and April, the stock market just collapsed. All right. And many large companies also came down by large, successful, stable companies came down 40%
Yeah.
or 50%. The smaller companies came down 70, 80%. And many of them have still not recovered, right? A lot of people, a lot of common man investors, Aam Aadmi investors panicked. Arey boss, mera paisa gaya. And they withdrew their money from the market. That's the most terrible thing to do.
Yeah.
When the market tanks, if it is tanking for a reason which is not permanent, right? And all these reasons are temporary. That was because of COVID. COVID is now on its way out, right? Life in India has almost come back to normal. The stock market is back hugely from the March lows. So when the market crashes, that's the best time to buy more.
Right.
And when the market is at its peak, when everybody is desperate by or kharido, that is not the right time to buy because you're buying it too expensive, right?
Correct.
So these are things which, Saman's Squirrel, I think it's a great innovation, a great startup. They will be able to help you in this.
Thanks. Thanks so much for that vote of confidence. So, one more question for
Yeah,
you.
and so so you can now appoint me distributor for Squirrel.
You are our boss. So,
Acha.
so one more question I want to squeeze in. We've got 12 more minutes, so I want to squeeze in another couple of
Yeah.
questions. And I think one very relevant question that came for specifically for you, which was about how do I turn my idea into product? And this is something that you started. When we started this discussion, you talked about that the genesis of you investing in startups and you writing this book was that a lot of your students would come and ask you that I have this problem statement, I have this great idea, I want to turn it into a business. And so what is your advice for somebody who thinks he has a great fantastic idea and wants to convert it into what you rightly said, a product, a functional product, a prototype, a proof of concept, whatever you may call it. So, what's the journey, or what is your advice for somebody like that?
So let me let me modify the question slightly.
Sure.
Let me look at converting an idea into a business. And I'll tell you
Okay.
why I'm
Perfect. Yeah,
differentiating,
yeah, yeah. Perfect.
because I have seen a huge number of companies, huge number of youngsters, particularly tech youngsters, who create a wonderful product. They have no clue how to sell it. No clue, right? In fact, Samant, if you permit me, I'll share one little story
Please, please.
from my experience. Right? We were evaluating for potential investment one company which was founded by two or three very bright young engineers, right? And they had created something that they called a waterless urinal. Okay? Now, this they came to us for investments at a time when Prime Minister Modi had just announced his Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, right?
Yeah.
About 2-3 months after that. Now, suddenly all of us investors were delighted. We said, look, Prime Minister Modi has said construct 2 crore toilets. Where is the water? Where will these toilets be maintained? Where will they be kept clean? So we were extremely excited. We said, boss, इसमें तो पैसा डालना ही डालना है. So we asked them, look, how will you market this? Oh, we'll appoint distributors. We said, wonderful, because a thing like this would be typically sold through hardware and sanitary ware stores, and therefore they need distributors. So wonderful. So we said, okay, we need about a month and a half to study your business in detail. And we did that. And then we called them back. We said, okay, now we are about to finalize. And those guys were looking extremely excited. We said, look, what happened? Sir, we are, now we are working on a female version of the same thing. We said, hang on, what happened to the earlier thing you had talked about, the waterless urinal? हाँ sir, वो है. We said, what happened to the distributors you wanted to appoint? हाँ वो हो जाएगा sir. Let us first wait for the female version to be out, and then we'll appoint distributors. At a stroke, all of us investors said, nahi, this is not the right company to invest in. because these guys have converted it into a great R&D project, right? That's not a business. It's not a business. It's not a business till you know how to market it, how to sell it, and so on. So I don't know if I'm answering this question, but I would say it's very, very important to realize that your business is not just a product. See, creating a product is not difficult. I mean, if you're a tech guy, you can create a product. If you're a software guy, you can create a prototype, not an issue. You'll probably get a team together, or you may outsource it, or whatever. I think the far tougher thing is to generate a business out of it. And I would say, very, very importantly, if the founder does not have business sense, he should not get into creating a startup, or he should have a co-founder. So if this guy is the products guy, the other guy should be the business guy. You know, the guy who takes it to the market, takes it to business, does the sales and so on. So I would in fact say creating a product is no big deal. A lot of people do that. Uska dhanda lana,
Yeah,
getting money out of it is the big thing. Is the big thing.
I couldn't.
So I'm not sure I've answered that question, but I've
I
twisted
have
the question a little and answered it.
no. I think you've answered the question beyond the question, because at the end of the day, the
Yeah.
intent of the business of any business is to make money. And why restrict
Absolutely.
it from an idea to a product? At the end of the day, it has to
Right.
go from
Absolutely.
product to business. So I think
Oh,
you've
by the way,
taken.
there is another interesting thought. Another interesting thought. If you're the kind of guy who's not a businessman, right, but you're a great guy at developing better and better products, it's a good idea to get a strategic investor. So, for example, let's take an example. Let's say um, you are a great software guy and you keep generating newer and newer software products. You get a large software company, maybe Infosys, maybe TCS, maybe one of the smaller guys, to become a strategic investor, maybe take a 30, 40, 50% stake in your company. You are the product developer. You keep developing and churning out newer and newer products. They will use their brand, their reach to take it to market, right? So then you don't have to worry about business, except that you have to work jointly with your strategic partner to figure out what will sell and what will not sell, because then you're doing only products. That's also a possible direction.
No, very, very valid point. And I couldn't agree more with you that at the end of the day, it's very important not just to think from idea to product, but to think from idea to product to revenue to monetization to cash flows to profitability. And I think
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely,
maybe
boss.
there was a time in our startup ecosystem that you could get even funding at an idea level also, right? But I think as the
Yes.
ecosystem is evolving, now
Yeah.
even the investors are wanting to see more proof of concept, like you talked about, more
Correct.
visibility of
Correct.
revenue model, ability to execute, and so on and so forth. So I think
Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
ecosystem has really evolved to that extent. So,
Absolutely. Yes.
so I
Yes.
think I'm
They
kind.
want proof. They want proof. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this has been fantastic. I think we've hopefully we've done justice to the time and what the viewers wanted to listen to. And there is this. I will throw it open to the few people who are on the call in case there is anything that they would want to ask now. Otherwise, I think we can conclude this session, and I think we should. There is lots that we can learn from you, and I'm very keen to do a follow-up session with a little different topic.
Sure. Always welcome. And there is always lots that I learn from you
Uh,
and from all the other youngsters, by the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a mutual learning program, so to say. But I think the equation is more tilted in our favor. I am very positive that we take away more from you in these interactions.